Thank you for joining us today at the Three Rivers Venture Fair for our highly anticipated University Technology Showcase. The Tech Showcase competition highlights the best and brightest innovations coming out of Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh. The top three university presenters will receive prize money of $2,500 for first place, $1,500 for second place, and $1,000 for third place, as well as bragging rights. Winners will be decided by you, the viewers. At the end of all of the presentations, we will provide you with information on how to text your votes to us. The winners will then be announced at 2 p.m. today, prior to our keynote speaker session. To better understand how the process works, each presenter will be given 3 minutes to pitch their idea, followed by 5 minutes of Q&A by our esteemed panel of judges.
Hello everyone, my name is Kalani Cook. I am the founder and executive director of Black Tech Nation. We are a Pittsburgh headquartered national digital organization geared towards standing in the gap between the tech community and the Black community. And we are hopefully going to build a Black tech ecosystem in the region to bring more Black tech talent to our wonderful city.
Hello, my name is Afshan Khan. I'm a portfolio executive with Innovation Works, one of the most active early seed stage investors here in southwestern Pennsylvania, and I focus on hardware.
Hi, my name is Alana Diamond. I'm managing partner of 412 Venture Fund. We're a new fund that launched in Pittsburgh. We support entrepreneurs with late seed stage and early stage A investments with a connection to Pittsburgh.
Hi, I'm Pat Moran, a partner at Open Prairie Ventures. We are operating our fourth fund, known as the Rural Opportunities Fund, a USDA licensed rural business investment company. As such, we are investing in U.S. rural, EBITDA positive food and agribusinesses, and it's a joy to be here. Thank you very much.
We would also like to thank the participating universities and the university mentors who helped to pull all of this together. Reed McManigal from Carnegie Mellon University and Paul Petrovich from the University of Pittsburgh. Finally, a special thanks to our University Technology Showcase sponsors, Cohen & Company, Cozen O'Connor, Carnegie Mellon University, and the University of Pittsburgh for their generous support. And now, without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, my name is Howie Chosit, and I'm here with one of my partners, Jason Rose, in our company called Omnibus Medical Devices. We want to make medical devices that are accessible to everyone. Our beachhead device is a new ventilator called RoboVent. What we've seen from the COVID-19 is that it really has exposed us to see how stagnant technology can limit access to healthcare. Even with this highly contagious respiratory illness, where proximity to properly treat patients expose providers to disease and puts stress on resources, we learned this from the recent COVID pandemic. What we want to do with Omnibus medical devices is we want to improve patient medical care, make patient care readily accessible, and preserve medical resources. In particular, not just PPE, but the people, the caregivers, perhaps the most precious resource who deliver the medical care. What COVID-19 has specifically shown us is at first there was a ventilator problem. Of course, current ventilators are quite pricey, and emergency ventilators weren't adequate to support the COVID-19 needs, as well as the needs of other respiratory illnesses. We also realized there's a limitation on ICU the workforce, and the global situation was just far, far worse than just what was in the United States. There are fewer ICU providers, fewer technology available. But also in the United States, in low-income areas, rural areas, this problem is true as well. So what we want to do, is we sort of want to take the ICU out of the hospital, but we also want to improve the ICU in the hospital as well. We want to make a ventilator that works and is inexpensive, and we want to make sure the equipment integrates with existing technology as well as what we're seeing in telehealth. But what we want to do in the near term is make sure we can introduce some technology that may help the next COVID-19 surge. So what we want to do more specifically with the RoboVent is, I think I'll let my clinical partner, Jason Rose, explain what the advances we want to make, because he's a medical doctor. He's the one on the ground really solving these problems.
All right, and I think, so we'll introduce the robotic ventilator. And so this is an actual video of our prototype that we've developed. So this is a fully featured standalone ventilator. The video is actually working on a Michigan test lung, it's called. The ventilator will have full connectivity to EHR and hospital networks, and it will integrate machine learning that guides patient care in real time that can help providers and researchers improve patient outcomes. The market on who's buying this, we have our traditional accounts in the United States, but we can also target emergency medical services like ambulances, looking at emerging and under-resourced markets. With some examples here, such as Brazil and India, or some countries in Africa even have a very poor ventilator penetration in military applications as well. And this is our Omnibus medical team with Howie and myself, including Keith Cook, Lou Lee, and Brett Zubiotti.
So I want to say this team really is an all-star team. Our skills complement each other, both on the technology side as well as on the business and regulatory side as well. I also want to point out that we have a group of people who aren't from Pittsburgh, who came to Pittsburgh and want to stay here because we have the right combination of talent, and I think the ecosystem here is conducive for us forming this kind of company and making it a great success.
Thank you. Thank you. Great presentation, guys. My first question is, you mentioned that this was going to be more affordable and that it would work in low-income countries, and you could use it on in EMS kinds of situations. Can you tell me a little bit about what you foresee the cost structure to be and what you could sell it for?
So our current projections are we will be able to sell this device for about between $1,000 and $1,500. And that's sell the device, it won't cost us to make that much.
Mm-hmm. And what will it cost you to make it? Do you know?
So we had a bill of materials which got us to around, I think, $300 to $400, but that doesn't include labor. And the $300 is a liberal estimate. What we've done, which I think is pretty cool, is we were able to rebuild some of the components using readily sourced materials. And it's one of the problems that the ventilators had was the sensors and other components were just hard to source. It really, COVID-19 tested our supply chain and it unveiled frailties in it. With our technology, if one supply goes away, we have an alternative one.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, Howie. Thank you for that presentation. So my question is around the pandemic, and I'm assuming you all put this together in response to the pandemic. Am I correct, or was this something being made prior?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So once the pandemic is over and there's no longer this level of need, how do you foresee this being used in other ways and to keep up the same amount of interest from whomever your purchasers would be?
This is a Jason question.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So COVID-19, we don't know how long it'll stay with us, number one. Hopefully it won't be with us too long, but I think if you look back the last 20 years, we've had the H1N1 pandemic in 2009, 2010. We had SARS-CoV-1, which was in the early 2000s, and then we had Middle East respiratory syndrome virus as well, which is another coronavirus in the mid-2010s. And Ebola virus. But essentially, I told you 5 global potentials for global pandemics. Unfortunately, I don't think it's ever going to go away completely. There's always a risk for pandemic flu at the very least and other coronaviruses. So I think that it's taught us that we need to be better prepared. So I think there's always going to be an increased demand for ventilators. But some of the numbers we showed, for instance, in certain countries in Africa, they have single-digit number of ventilators for millions of people in their population, which is certainly not enough to provide ICU care. And so I think there is truly a global shortage in ventilators when we look at low and middle income countries especially. So I think that that's never going away. And then going into the future, as we mentioned, ventilators don't integrate with telehealth, which we're using to stretch our current provider base, which for an ICU physician like myself, it took, 4 years undergrad, 4 years medical school, 6 years of postgraduate training. We unfortunately cannot manufacture them quickly enough. So we have to spread our kind of scope with the providers we have. And so telehealth is one of the ways we're doing that. This ventilator would integrate with that. And then all of the opportunities with machine learning to actually improve patient outcomes, even beyond COVID-19 and what the outcomes were prior to COVID-19. Can we improve on that further?
And if I could add just 2 more quick points, I think the low cost will make it easier to disseminate this technology. So, let's face it, 47% of the people, prior to COVID-19, 47% of the people who went on ventilators in the United States, they died, but they died because they were sick, not because the ventilators were bad. And my hope is that this ventilator is so low cost that it will become accessible to people who normally would not have gone on the ventilator because it's such a scarce resource. So maybe we can derail the progression of a disease earlier on than normal. And then the other point I want to say is because we have this telehealth remote capability, we have also the ability to generate lots of data. So I think not only can we mine that data to learn how to develop better care, I think the RoboVentilator is just a beachhead application for Omnibus medical devices in general. I think we're going to automate the whole ICU and be able to generate data from all the machines to help improve patient care all around.
Fantastic. Great presentation and great team. My last question is, you talked about making it accessible and preserving resources, and Howie and Jason, you've just given some examples of that. How would you work with the providers, whether they're the primary doctors or the other healthcare service personnel, to train and be able to adapt to this system?
That's a great question. And so, number one, I can say we're going to gain input from providers directly as we continue to develop the device. I myself am an end user of a ventilator. I'm an ICU physician and pulmonologist, but stakeholders like respiratory therapists, nursing staff, as well as emergency medical services, we plan to gain their input as we design this device. The aspect of it that it would be fully functional ventilator compared to some of the other emergency inexpensive ventilators that were coming out with COVID-19, if you actually look at one of those, they require a lot more training because that's not what we're used to actually using in the ICU. Not only can they not do as much, but it's the time intensive training, and often it requires more bedside monitoring, which is exactly the opposite of what we would want, especially in a pandemic. So by being more like what we're used to, it actually lowers the investment as far as training and personnel time. And we actually can lower the amount of bedside interaction once you do get trained on the device. And it's going to be a simple, intuitive interface that is easy to operate by all providers in ICU, taking care of the respiratory failure patients.
I'll be presenting a startup. We started with Professor Andy Schwartz and myself, that is called ThinkLink. And the idea is to connect brains to the world, as it's written here, and I'll tell you more about it. So, So in many pathologies, and people's brain work perfectly, and unfortunately, the spinal cord might be destructed, or sometimes you can't speak anymore. There are many pathologies where it would be really, truly interesting to connect to a brain, understand the intention of the person who cannot execute something, and try to execute it right. So this idea of decoding intention can have a wide range of applications, because if people cannot speak, we can understand from their brain activity what they want to say and say it for them. Like Stephen Hawking used to do it himself, he would follow letters and create words. But you can also allow people who are tetraplegic or paraplegic to control arms, so they can live again, scratch themselves, do elementary things. and much more advanced things like maybe control an exoskeleton, maybe one day allow you to drive. So this idea of reading intention and perhaps also writing information to portions of the brain that are not connected anymore is really what we want to be doing and what we're doing for the last 15 years. So what is our product? Our product is to develop a small chip that you can put in somebody's head, following all the NIH and all the FDA approval lines of development to be able to connect to an area that is not functioning or is not connected anymore to what we want to be doing, and decode intention. And that can only be done properly if you have to, by being invasive. It means you have to go under the skull, put one time this little chip there that will start streaming to the outside world, as you can see here. And then you can have a small computer that computes what you want to do. For example, if you want to drive your car, it will decode, and then you start steering the wheel. If you want to control a robotic arm, it's the same. So this is a product, and I've developed many of these to restore vision for blind people, 2 generations that went to successful trial, and also created 2 startups on this technology. The hardest thing here is to make it survive by being in a human body. And the second thing is to make it simple to use and simple to implant. So any doctor in the world can do it without heavy machinery and without failing it, because we're talking about human lives and human dignity. And so what we've done is many people around the world, and Andy is a world leader in this kind of technology, have massive pieces of technology that are not meant to be implanted in a human being and used on a daily basis. So as you can see here, you have huge racks, huge connectors I will show you later. And the idea is to shrink it all and make it very small with this new technology that I'll be showing you. So what makes us unique is, you hear about Elon Musk doing this. Elon Musk is using what Andy has developed, and like many people in the world. But in this breakthrough we've done lately here in Pittsburgh was to introduce and use technology for something called neuromorphic, which means it's a branch of engineering where we copy brains to build hardware. And this was initiated in the US at Caltech in the 90s by Professor Carver Mead, who is the father of all electronics, the one we use today. And that led to many development, and to which I belong. This is my field. So the idea is always to copy brains, and then you end up, for example, here we copied a retina, a silicon retina, and built one. And this one was used to restore vision for blind people. So the advantage of copying brains is that you are really speaking the language of brains. So you easily interact and compute. It's also very low power. Brains burn 20 watts a day. And it also has many advantages in terms of computation. You don't need lots of batteries. The computation requires very few energy. And so it has many advantages. And most of all, what allows us to be above everybody is that this technology allows you to have an infinite or a limited number of electrodes. You can put thousands, hundreds of thousands, whereas most of the existing technology will go hardly beyond 200, 1,000, really maximum. And that is not enough because you won't have enough information.
Thanks, Benjamin. That was very interesting. My question has to do with other ways, or you might call it even competition to this approach, because it sounds like you're opening somebody's brain and implanting something. And if somebody's blind and would be able to restore their vision, I can see why they might take that risk. I'm just wondering what you see as the competition for this approach for the kinds of things you're talking about, like scratching your back or asking for something. Are there other approaches people are using that don't involve opening your brain?
Sure. For now, you need a caretaker that costs thousands of dollars a month, and that's the best option you have. Otherwise, technology-wise, you can hear about EEG, but EEG are very sloppy because you're above the skull and you don't know what's really happening to you. So you can't really decode. The only way to restore and give I mean, back, motion to people, and it's too loud to go in under the skull. So just to let you know, when we design such a system, the scope is to make the surgery as fast as possible, as non-invasive as possible, and easy to be done. Because if you design a very complicated product, it won't work because people won't be able to implant it. So all
But you
those
still have
parameters.
to open their skull, right?
Yeah, but today people do it on a daily basis. If you go to the hospital here, people who have epilepsy, they put the electrode, they stay in the hospital for a day. So we're talking about like a small, I count in centimeter, I'm sorry. We're counting about few centimeters. So it's really, I would say it's a surgeon, any surgeon can do this surgery. It's not very complicated. Yeah.
Thank you.
We're not removing all of it. It's no. Yeah.
Hi, Benjamin.
Hi.
Hi. So you mentioned very briefly the FDA and probably some regulatory things that have to go along with this, obviously so, right? So can you tell me what national medical regulations or approvals you would need for something like this? And if you do, how far are you along in that process? Like, have you all already gotten those permissions?
Okay, so we are starting the company in the sense that we are looking for investors, and we have a few we are thinking of, and it's the situation is not very good at the moment with COVID. So when you design such a product to become medical grade, you have to follow very strict rules from day one. You don't develop such a device and then think about it. You do it from day one. And so I have lots of experience in that. I've developed three generations. And normally you have a path where you, for example, you log everything you do on a daily basis following very strict protocol. And then you apply that to do a clinical trial. And to do a clinical trial, you have to have shown that your system can live inside the human body for a certain amount of time and that it's operating correctly. And normally you do that on pigs or small animals, just to show, look, I don't know if it's working, but I put it there and it's still responding and it's still working. That's all we need to do. And once we know that is working, it means your system is safe to be put in a human being. And then you, as you could see maybe in the video, the monkey could really move an arm because monkeys are smart. But we have also done it on humans here in Pittsburgh, and Obama came, and because he funded the project with the Obama Brain Project Initiative. So we can make it work. Now the question is, can we make it work in 1 centimeter? The question is yes, of course. It just requires money and energy and passion. You don't do this for the money. You do this because, as a scientist, when I made my first system for blind people work, and I went to the hospital and we saw it implanted on a human being, and it's a life, it's a family around it. And the day you turn it off, it's something you can never forget. So you can mess with these kind of things. You have to follow very, very strict protocols.
Benjamin, thank you very much for a very, very interesting presentation. I guess one of the questions I have, you're right, it's not about money, but at the end of the day, you are creating this not just for the benefit of humans, but also for helping as many people as you can. So how large do you estimate the market to be of people afflicted with some kind of paralysis or ailment that would require this?
So we looked at the costs today that we can reduce and all the pathologies, and we estimate it to be around 17 billion today. And you can just by tackling paralysis and reducing caregiver costs, and also many other fields. I would say, it's a 17 billion market just for moving an arm. So that's the product, right? First one. But then you can expand to many other products. For example, people who cannot speak anymore, you can make it speak. But then also there is a lot of things to be developed for, it's even more $1 billion to allow people to control things in their house or control a computer. Because what you have not seen is that once you put this system on a human being and he starts controlling an arm and says hi, it becomes, it's like you when you play tennis or you play tennis table, that racket becomes part of you. So people really start to feel that the robotic arm is part of their body.
So my name's Evan Lebovitz. My advisor is Dr. Mark Hudson. I'm going to talk today about Charge-OR. So anesthesia started about 150 years ago and has advanced rapidly. However, since that time, anesthesia and surgical scheduling really hasn't changed. The way that it is now involves usually an electronic medical record here showing the surgeries, and then some version of either a handwritten or electronic chart showing the anesthesiologists and the surgeons. These are combined every day to form what we call a day sheet that shows which providers manage which cases. This is then back translated into another electronic record showing which providers are here caring for which rooms. Every morning that's converted into a handwritten whiteboard with magnets and markers with the anesthesiologists, providers, and then the room numbers over here. Throughout the day, this is updated by hand in different methods throughout the country and throughout different hospitals to show which providers are left and who's going to be relieved on time or not. At Presbyterian, this is what the charge board looks like, hence the name. Here is the charge board on the left with the providers, and then on the right, this is the electronic medical record that we have. Because this is analog, of course, there's no communication between this whatsoever. Since UPMC Presbyterian, where I work most of the time, is a level 1 trauma center, in addition to these cases that are currently scheduled, we get level 1 traumas all the time. When that happens, the surgical team views the case. They call the providers by this very outdated technology, who call a charge nurse, who call an anesthesiologist, who call a variety of other providers, who call CRNA, call another nurse and a scrub tech in an operating room. And quite frankly, we can do a lot better than this. So hence Charge-OR. This is the only anesthesia-focused web and mobile app that integrates into the EMR to provide pre-op, intra-op, and post-op functionality. In the pre-op, it's an integrated anesthesia and surgical scheduling platform. In the intra-op period, it provides real-time updated scheduling information and smart messaging between teams. In the post-op time, our app provides data-driven analytics to continuously improve our algorithm and enhance patient care. There's a tremendous business opportunity for something like this. Our goal is to sell to hospitals on a per operating room basis. In the US, there are about 225,000 operating rooms. We can charge, we figure about $200 a month. This causes a potential revenue of about $540 million a year. A 1% improvement at UPMC Presbyterian is about $1.4 million per year. And previous data at UCLA suggests we can expect about a 7% improvement. So our goal is to gain customers through advertising and through acquisition of our startup by a large EMR company. So on our next steps, we recently won the First Gear program and the Kuznetsky Cup. We're going to complete a wireframe application. It's going to be completed hopefully within the next 1 to 2 months. We're then going to roll that out to beta testing at UPMC Mercy Hospital and receive feedback from users and then complete the final application. With the app completed, we're going to then roll out to regional hospitals and expand to the online marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. That was great. I'm curious about integration with things like Cerner and Epic, and also not just integration with them because you showed them side by side. I'm curious what would prevent them from just integrating something like this. It seems like it would be a relatively easy step. Why haven't they done it? Will they do it and be competition? That kind of whole.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, my brother's a 3D printing engineer, and when I talked to him about this, he said the exact same thing. He said it's such a good idea. Why hasn't anybody done it, right? And that's always the right question to ask. So the bottom line is that they can and they haven't, and it's because they're not interested in it. Epic and Cerner have really existed for one reason only, and that's been for billing. They've never been designed for user functionality. And in fact, that was one of the things I didn't show is how Epic looks. We use Cerner at most of the UPMC hospitals. It's a disaster when it comes to this. It does billing really well, but my goal and our goal for this application is to make it sort of, the iPhone of technology, in that if people want to use this, they want to have it so that they have access for this right now. And so Epic and Cerner aren't really interested in efficiency, but the thing is that the reason I think this will succeed is because no one's ever done this from an anesthesia perspective. Of course, I'm biased, But the bottom line is that surgeons generally run 2 to 3 operating rooms on a busy day, and they're the masters of those rooms. There's no doubt about it. But UPMC Presbyterian, we run 50 ORs a day. There's just no way they can run those. There are a variety of rooms across a variety of buildings, including Montefiore. So you need an anesthesiologist in charge who's going to allocate providers in cases like this. And really, the reason this I think will work is because no one's ever really been an anesthesiologist focused on efficiency on this type of scale.
To piggyback off of what you're saying, so you're indicating that no one has ever done it just simply because they haven't paid attention. So if I'm an investor, I want to know, how are you going to compete? Because medtech is huge and there are already companies doing amazing things around technology. How will you compete with bigger companies with the larger budgets who have already done similar things, who will literally just do what you guys are doing? And then if you can answer a second question is, if that doesn't happen, which I would hope for your case it doesn't, what is the opportunity for scale?
Yeah, so funny you should mention that. I talked to my boss Mark Hudson about scale yesterday on the phone, and so to answer your first question, medtech can do this. So I didn't show the competitors, which simply didn't have enough time. There are people who do each one of the things that we've done, but not quite to the same degree. There's an application called QGenda that we actually use. It's not bad, actually. I get an email every so often that describes when I'm going to show up, right? So I work Monday morning, for example, from 6 to 5 or something. Then I end up looking at that. That's really useful right until 6 o'clock in the morning. At that point, it ceases to be useful, right? Because it changes so quickly that there's just no way to keep that updated. There are no really good applications that run in real time. So that's sort of our, sort of the bread and butter that kind of keeps us, keeps people wanting to use the app, and we'll have people communicating back and forth. And then, but really the post-op data analytics is something that no one's ever done before. So that's really actually where the money is, so to speak. Mark Hudson is a sort of national, international guy in charge. I mean, he writes papers about this all the time. I've done a fellowship in practice management under his guidance, so I'm learning a lot about this. And essentially, what we are looking at is how to improve efficiency in providing anesthetic care. And when you work in like a surgery center, the surgeons run this, like I said, and that's where the focus has been. People have focused on the surgical scheduling for a long time. No one's looked at anesthesia. And to be very honest with you, anesthesiologists are sort of well known for going to work, doing a really good job, and going home. There's not actually a lot of innovation in anesthesia. So I think the field is ripe for that. And then remind me your second question again.
Should no bigger company take this idea and run with it?
Oh, how's it scale? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a startup. There's going to be a startup cost right now. What we're trying to figure out is whether it's going to be valid to charge for that or not. I've heard arguments both ways that a case can be made in either direction. The scalability, though, should actually not be a problem. And the reason is because it shouldn't cost us any more money to increase the size of the scope of this. UPMC right now in Allegheny County alone has 200 operating rooms. So if that's all we do, that's a revenue of about $40,000 a month, about $500,000 a year. Just for that, we could start it tomorrow. So it's just a matter of expanding in that manner. And so the real question, I think, is to what degree do we choose to go and integrate into the EMR right away? Because an argument could be made that we want to get this to market quickly without integration. It would be less useful, but would get out more quickly and cheaply. And there is no integration right now, so it's still an improvement. Thankfully, the status quo has set the bar so low that all we have to do is sort of tiptoe over it. But eventually we want to make an app that's going to be really fully functional so that, as an anesthesiologist, I get a text on my phone that says, hey, look, Mrs. Jones is in the pre-op area. I'm going to go see her. Or Mr. Smith is a level 1 trauma. He's coming upstairs now and we need to go take care of it. And that's sort of my goal for it.
Evan, thank you for a very interesting presentation. I may be asking a question that in part you've already answered. However, My understanding is when you say intra-op, if you could just give me a quick example, as we're probably running out of time. I believe that a lot of situations are that anesthesia is charged every 15 minutes in terms of 15-minute increments. In an intra-op situation, is the charge OR also tracking that in terms of monitoring the patient and sort of having, the exact
Yeah, good question. So that's a really good question. So what I mean by that, you're absolutely right. Anesthesia is billed every 15 minutes. The key to OR efficiency is a complete and sort of well encapsulated utilization of what we call prime time hours. And what I mean by that is, even though this sounds backwards, this is the way that it is. Our goal every morning is to match the surgical cases to our staffing and not the other way around. Right? There are always emergencies that happen and things like that. At Presbyterian, they happen a lot. At small outpatient community hospitals, they don't to a much different degree. But one of the major issues right now is that the hospital, the providers, and my bosses and things like that, including Mark Hudson, decide every morning or on a monthly or quarterly basis what the prime time hours are going to be. So we'll decide, for example, it'll be 6:30 to 3 or 6:30 to 5, whatever it's going to be. And you staff for that amount of time. When that time is not utilized, like if it's done at 1 o'clock, that money is sort of saved, but not really, because you've already paid for those people. The problem is when you go over that. So if you run cases like late into the night, if you're not staffed for that, it's extremely expensive to bring people in, things like that. So I know I'm out of time, but what I just wanted to say is if your OR, one of your ORs ends at 1 o'clock, for example, and your prime time ends at 3, and you have 2 hours of surgery left, if you fit a 2-hour case in there, that's where the money is. You can really do a lot there. If you try and squeeze a 4-hour case in there, you're not really doing yourself any favors. So our app is going to take that analytics and fit that in is to be the most efficient way possible. And the UCLA system that did this showed about a 7% improvement in efficiency, which is about $10 million in savings a year.
Hello, my name is Luke Barenbrock, and I am the co-creator of Champ. I want to start by asking you to think about the biggest purchases of your life. What comes to mind first? Your home, perhaps your car? Would you believe it if I told you that after your home and your car, the biggest purchase of your life will be hearing aids? It is estimated that hearing aids can cost up to $9,000, and most are manufactured by only 6 companies around the world. But whenever I tell your 60-year-old self, who has a 1 in 3 chance of needing hearing aids, that change is coming, what would you think? That's why my colleague Elaine Mormer and I co-created Champ, championing hearing using accessible medication experts at the community pharmacy. Together, Elaine as an audiologist and I as a pharmacist created a dynamic educational program to train pharmacists how to help people purchase hearing aids where they never could before, the community pharmacy. Here's the need. Hearing aids have long been expensive and difficult to obtain, but federal law passed in 2017 is disrupting the industry by creating a new category of hearing aids to be available over the counter and without medical evaluation. These external forces from FDA will ultimately increase accessibility and affordability of hearing aids for nearly 20 million people who have mild to moderate hearing loss. Now consumers will have the opportunity to seek OTC hearing aids where they purchase other medical devices, the community pharmacy. This means that pharmacists with no formal training will soon find themselves selling OTC hearing aids. To draw a parallel, in 2009, community pharmacists were on the front lines of the H1N1 flu pandemic, prior to being nationally recognized as immunizers. Today, nearly 43% of adults receive their annual flu shot at a neighborhood pharmacy. Our solution is one of a kind, it's first to market, and it's an online certificate program to train pharmacy students and pharmacy professionals how to help people seeking OTC hearing aids at the community pharmacy. Champ has delivered micro-credential badges to nearly 120 student pharmacists who have already completed our training program at the University of Pittsburgh School of Pharmacy. Our work was initially funded with nearly $30,000 from various sources, and we are currently poised to launch a healthcare education company providing education to professionals and to students. Our first offering will be CHAMP. We are currently seeking a CEO and additional startup funding to launch CHAMP to our initial market of nearly 140 institutions of higher education and nearly 60,000 pharmacy locations nationwide. Thank you.
So you talk about the healthcare education company, and it's quite interesting to see that law change. Question for you, similar to other certifications such as BCLS or ACLS, would the hearing aid certification require reaccreditation?
It would not require reaccreditation for the pharmacist as an individual. It would be a credential that they can stack upon their existing pharmacy license.
Hi, Luke. So my question is going to be around valuation for something like this. Can you just talk a little bit about what your projections are and like the time frame for that?
Sure. So in our initial customer discovery interviews, where Elaine and I interviewed community pharmacists, they had no awareness that OTC hearing aids were coming to the community pharmacy. And with about 120,000 pharmacy professionals in the country, we have a large market to educate before regulations are passed. And those regulations were due in August of 2020, and they have not yet been published by the FDA. Similar education or certificates that allow pharmacists to give immunizations or allow to give COVID tests are valued about $250 per education program for that certificate.
Thanks, Luke. Were you done, Kalani? Okay. So my question is I guess around kind of competition. First of all, just to make sure I understand correctly, do pharmacists need a certification to be able to do this, or can they do it without? Now you're just adding a certification?
They would not need a certification to sell an OTC hearing aid.
Okay, so then I'm just wondering what's to prevent people who are already providing certifications for pharmacists from just adding this, since, you know, pharmacists, it seems like there are two kinds of competition. One is the pharmacist doesn't need it, they could just sell it. And the second is people who are already providing certification, if it ever becomes required, could kind of just add on a module. Can you address that?
Yep, to answer number one, pharmacists, if you've ever known one, are very type A. We have to be to keep people safe and with their medications. So from our customer discovery, we found that pharmacists are very uncomfortable with this idea, and they're seeking education to get on board, much like immunizations. There's a required certificate before we can give shots at the community pharmacy. And for number two, certainly someone could try to also provide an education certificate program. But Elaine and I feel that what makes us unique is that Elaine is an audiologist and I'm a pharmacist, and together we can have a very unique way of training people so that the pharmacists understand hearing from the audiologist, how we can work with audiologists, and how we can keep hearing aids out of people's hands who really are not eligible.
Good morning, I'm graduate student Alexis Nolfi, and along with Mangesh Kulkarni, we are part of the team Sight Solutions Lens. Dry eye disease is a debilitating condition characterized by pain, irritation, decreased vision, and damage to the ocular surface of the eyes. Unfortunately, it's also very prevalent, so up to 1 in 3 of us will suffer from dry eye at some point in our lifetimes. And unsurprisingly, this really lends itself to a total global dry eye market that's fairly large, valued at about $5 billion currently, 50% or so of which is tied up in the cost of prescription drug prices. For me though, dry eye is very personal. So my symptoms started in 2012 after being passed from doctor to doctor and specialist to specialist and trying one cumbersome eye drop product after another cumbersome eye drop product. In 2020, here we are, and I still do not have symptomatic relief from my dry eye symptoms. And unfortunately, my story isn't atypical. Most of us dry eye sufferers actually have the exact same story. So as fate would have it, in fall of 2018, I met with dry eye specialist Dr. Vishal Janji, and we launched a plan to come up with a treatment that actually does work. And this is really where Sight Solutions Lens was born. The Sight Solutions lens isn't just another cumbersome eye drop treatment. It's a revolutionary new treatment modality that combines the use of a platform coating strategy using natural biopolymers coated onto soft contact lenses that encapsulates a novel drug that targets the underlying cause of dry eye. So it's not just a symptomatic treatment like those cumbersome artificial tears. The power, though, is in the platform drug combination. When you put a Sight Solutions lens on the eye, the drug starts to release in a slow, sustained way at optimal doses over days. And this really makes for a more effective product, a product that actually works.
Thus, our innovative treatment modality has distinct competitive advantage over currently available prescription over-the-counter drugs on all different grounds relevant to patients and other stakeholders. Currently, we are at preclinical stage, about to start our large animal model and have plans to advance our technology for other indications through discontinuous innovation and multiple patents. In fact, we have already submitted a full patent for our dry eye indication in March of this year. So far, we have received over $120,000 in internal funding through the university, and the technology has been well received with numerous awards. Though we feel confident about our team's scientific expertise, we are seeking guidance and mentorship in regulatory affairs and are looking for business partners and additional funding for our larger scale animal studies. We appreciate your time and attention and happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
So a question, you mentioned that you received some good funding from Pitt, that you've submitted your full patent. Congratulations. Where are you with respect to starting up the company and negotiating licensing with Pitt?
So we are starting our large scale animal model, a large animal model in rabbits. We have shown efficacy and our hypothesis is proven in vitro, but we wanted to have in a animal model which is the similar size of humans. So rabbit has the eye curvature and the eye size similar to humans. So we want to first have proof of concept proven in the rabbit model that our technology actually works, one, and second, we can then, based on those studies, determine the dosage needed, the regimen needed. So once we have all that answers, and we hope to get that thing done within the year, we are actually ready for next steps.
Yes, just to add a little bit, right, admittedly, we are still currently in the in vitro stages of this project, but our animal studies, which were slated to start around April or so, they've gotten bumped by a few months, as I'm sure you can imagine. But we have been in pretty much constant contact with the Innovation Institute. Janice Panza there has been awesome. She's our technology licensing officer. And so she's really kind of kept on top of us with what the next steps are. So we were fortunate to have gotten our patent submitted in March. And so now we're just aggressively pursuing starting those large animal studies.
Hi, so my question is, well, first of all, I have Refresh right here that stays on my desk at all times. I have a terrible dry eye and I wear contacts, so I'm totally personally liking this one for sure. So, but from personal experience as well, how do you market to people? Because people are very finicky about their eyes. We're very sensitive about things we put in our eyes. And so how do you market something like this, saying that there will be a drug released in my eye consistently, and like how long does the drug stay released? What are the long-term effects? So how would you talk to the normal consumer about something like this?
So I'm sure, as you know, it gets really cumbersome to put these eye drops in all the time. For me personally, I have a severe form of dry eye, so I have Sjogren's syndrome, which is an autoimmune condition where your tear glands actually get destroyed. And so I'm putting these drops in probably 20 times a day. You might be putting them in just as many times as I am, and you just get sick and tired of it after a while, especially when they don't work. So for anyone who's ever been to the eye doctor, the first time, they tell you they're going to put the drops in your eyes, they hand you a Kleenex because most of it is running down your face and it's draining away through your tear ducts, and you're losing so much product as well. And I'm sure, as you can attest to as well, these things are not cheap. So these eye drops get really, really expensive. And so I think at some point, the pain point just becomes so great, where at least I feel that I'm pretty much willing to try anything. And so contacts, thankfully, are a pretty familiar modality to a lot of people. I think a lot of us are comfortable already inserting them into our eyes. For people that aren't, you can certainly have help inserting them. If anything, if you put a contact in your eye and you wear it for maybe 3 or 4 days, so these will be indicated for about a 3 or 4 day usage period. That is how long our drugs will release for, and you won't necessarily have to remove them. So a one-time application for 3 or 4 days, I would probably take that little bit of cumbersomeness over putting in, 100 eye drops over the course of 4 days. So I think we would have a pretty strong marketing campaign that way. And also, if the product actually works, for me personally, and for so many people I've talked to, we just can't find relief. Even with the prescription products, Xiidra, Restasis, they just don't work well. And so if this is a product that actually does work, I don't care how much trouble it is, I'm going to use it.
Thank you. My question is around IP. You mentioned that you had it filed. Can you tell me what is protected? Is it the drug? Is it the lens? Is it the combination?
It's the combination. It's basically, we have 2 avenues going forward. One is our platform technology. So dry eye is our first indication, but then using the same technology, we can actually use this platform technology for other indications in dry eye, like keratitis or glaucoma. And so our patent actually covers all of that. Actually, because of that, it's more at leeway that we have, that we could actually go in different directions. And also we have also thought of or have plans to include corrective lenses in our platform technology. So that would then many of our in our discovery, in our patient discovery, customer discovery interviews, that was one of the point that came up, and that we added into our technology, that we can actually provide corrective lenses along with the treatment that we are doing for dry eye or any other eye that we actually use it for.
Hello, everybody. I'm here to talk about my company called Didero. Didero is an online education platform that we've been building at CMU. In the past decade, education has become increasingly high-tech. The pandemic has accelerated this trend. Many successful billion-dollar companies now operate in this space. These companies offer textbooks and MOOCs, as well as software for learning management, testing, and messaging. I teach at CMU, and I use these tools, but I found them lacking in key aspects. The problem is that to teach a course, we need not just one, but many of these tools. Trying to work with so many tools at once is inefficient and painful. The path forward is obvious. Build one integrated platform that has it all. This is exactly what we do in Didero. Integration yields superior technology and results in better user experience, more effective analytics and AI at lower costs. Now, how do we do this? We build a software stack where each layer offers one specific service. We start with the foundation of content and course management and build up with interactive books, communication services, auto and human grading, social networking, and finally, data analytics. These layers correspond to tools offered by companies such as Piazza, Gradescope, and Facebook. But we don't just glue them together. We integrate these layers tightly. We found that this integration is the key to better outcomes. For example, our users are happy and our retention rate is very high. Our students are more engaged by as much as 4 times, and they ask better questions. For these reasons, we won an innovation award at CMU. Now, I believe that we have an opportunity of historic proportions in front of us. Now, how do we get there? We currently have funding from National Science Foundation, Carnegie Mellon, and Amazon. Using this funding, we've grown exponentially so far and serve thousands of users today. Our plan moving forward is to grow at the same exponential pace, first within CMU and outside at pilot locations. Ultimately, our goal is to reach each and every student and instructor at a university or high school. In the long run, we will create our own content, expand into social networking and publishing. This robust growth is technically feasible because our infrastructure is fully scalable. It runs fully on the cloud.
Okay, thank you, Umut. Very interesting. So wanted to understand, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier in your presentation, what makes you unique and having a competitive advantage compared to the other platforms that are now in quite widespread use?
Yeah, excellent question. I'll go back to my slide where I've draw the existing companies and where they correspond in our software stack. For example, Piazza. Piazza offers communication services, and I used Piazza for several years. And I started my project actually out of frustration with limitations of Piazza. What's the problem? Let's say you want to ask a question on an example. As a student, you want to ask a question on an example. You have to go to Piazza and say, hey, instructor, on page 15, paragraph 3, there is an example in sentence 5. Could you please explain that to me? Okay. By the time as an instructor, I get to page 15, paragraph 3, sentence 5, I realize either my notes has changed, I'm not able to find the student's question, maybe the student made a mistake and maybe counted the 5th paragraph instead of 3rd. It's a nightmare. So this was exactly the reason, in fact, one of the reasons that I started developing something new. So in Didero, questions are integrated with books. So if you have a question about an example, as a student, you just click on the example and you ask your question, much like how, for example, on Facebook, you would comment on a post. As an instructor, when I receive students' question, I see the context, or the student is talking about this example. So the questions are contextual. Now, in this example, what we've seen is the advantage of integrating communication services with books. And I can basically do the same, talk about the same thing for the next level, Gradescope, another tool that we use at Carnegie Mellon. Okay, now in Gradescope, you can take exams, but you can't ask questions on exams. You can take quizzes, but you can't ask questions on quizzes. Well, in Didero, we have quizzes and you can ask questions, okay? This is super important. If you can't ask questions in an education environment, it really doesn't work. It is all about interaction and communication. So in Didero, we have like this thing where these services, they don't just stand alone. It's not just a single thing that you do here and there. Everything just kind of works beautifully together, integrate in an integrated fashion. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Umut. My question is, who is your customer exactly? Would you be planning on licensing this to other educational platforms? Explain that to me.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So Didero is actually, covers a lot of ground. So, when I think of this, who are the stakeholders, right? I think of schools like Carnegie Mellon. We use Didero at Carnegie Mellon. I think of teachers, individual teachers. I think of publishing companies. I think of learners, meaning students, for example, or more generally, anybody who wants to learn. I think of employers. I think of parents that teach, that pay oftentimes for the students. So really, all of these could be our customers in the sense that we could license our product to schools. We could work with publishers to take their traditional textbook mechanisms, textbook publication mechanisms, and turn it into something much more advanced, basically bridging with Web 2.0. We could allow students, right, build up basically Didero, because Didero is so integrated, it knows so much about students. It can help students in their education. It can help them to get a job. It can help them what's their weak spot, what's their strong spot. It can help employers to match students and their skills to jobs. I assign grades. I hate the job of assigning a grade because in my mind at Carnegie Mellon, for example, we have these brilliant students. We give them A's and B's and C's and D's. This is so crude. This is like the stuff of, 500 years ago. Every student has a strength, but we are not able to find them because we teach so many of them. A tool like Didero that knows what the students are doing can find these things and then and give information to employers, give information to students to match them up properly. So anyway, coming back to your question, I feel that there are many sources of income that we can use. For example, we can do subscription to universities, high schools. We can partner with publication houses. We can provide employment services. We can get ad revenue. And finally, Didero has a beautiful engineering. It has a separate API, actually. We can provide this powerful separate API to other companies who want to use them. Does that answer the question?
So actually I'm going to build on what Kalani said. Do you have anybody who's paying you? And if so, how are they paying you? What are you, and I'm also interested, have you thought about go-to-market strategy? And those are sort of integrated.
Excellent question. Yeah, thank you. So there is sort of somebody paying me, as in Carnegie Mellon actually pays for the development of this tool. And implicitly speaking, the understanding is that we serve thousands of students at Carnegie Mellon. And because of that, they're happy to help us continue development. Now, more concretely, Carnegie Mellon has a campus on Qatar, and Qatar pays $100 per student, $100 per student to us. Like we're not a company right now, but to the project.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. This is Max Sims representing Mindtrace today. It's great to be here, and I want to introduce you to Dan, the musician. Like 80,000 Americans each year, Dan was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And brain surgery is particularly scary because patients want to make sure they'll be the same person coming out of surgery that they were going into surgery. And so the challenge for the neurosurgeon is really to find the best route to remove as much tumor as possible versus damaging nearby healthy brain tissue. That could lead to cognitive deficits like being unable to walk or talk. And in Dan's case, the surgical team needs to protect his musical ability. But in order to protect it, you have to understand where it is in the brain. And so during our I-Core experience, the NSF National I-Core experience, we learned neurosurgeons are very good at collecting the detailed neuroimaging and behavioral data to protect the person, but they experience significant pain points when it comes to trying to tile this data together. And so this experience really informed our current solution, where we bring together in 3D, overlaying all the imaging and behavioral data clinicians want when they plan these resection routes. And once the data is aligned, it allows for our patent pending IP to simulate a surgical resection path and ultimately predict the cognitive outcome of that patient all before the first incision. We're positioned between companies that really specialize in neuropsych testing and companies that produce neuronavigation products like BrainLab and Stryker. And we sit really smack dab in between these two worlds. We're currently working on two product lines. The first is called StrongView and allows for neuropsychologists and neurosurgeons to conduct behavioral testing before, during, and after surgery. And the second product is called StrongMap. And this brings together behavioral data from StrongView and pairs it with neuroimaging data. And this is what allows surgeons to simulate a surgical resection path and ultimately predict that patient's cognitive outcome. I mentioned Dan earlier, but it's important to understand that our technology can be equally applied to tumor and epilepsy patients. Taken together, there are 230,000 newly diagnosed epilepsy and tumor patients each year in the United States. And from speaking with key opinion leaders in the field, We believe our technology can make an immediate impact with 20 to 30,000 of these patients. And each one of these patients costs our healthcare system somewhere between $100,000 and $250,000 each year. And so if we can lower the cost of caring for these patients by even 1%, this would result in $42 million in healthcare savings to our healthcare system. We're currently participating in 3 accelerator programs right now as we refine our business model. We've raised $133,000 to date, and the most recent 25K came from the Optum Startup Studio. Optum is a subsidiary of United Healthcare, and so this is really allowing us to understand the relative value we can contribute to payers, hospital systems, and providers. Our founding team is based at CMU, and the foundational academic research was conducted with 150 patients and resulted in 8 peer-reviewed publications. Dan was actually one of these patients, and he ultimately played his saxophone while he was awake at the end of surgery to show that his musical ability was still intact. Thank you.
I guess I'm starting off the questioning. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about business model. I got that you feel like there are about 20 to 30,000 patients per year. That would be your, first market, and that there's a lot of healthcare savings. But can you tell me a little bit about how you're going to charge for the product and how much per patient and what the total addressable market size would be?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What you're going to take away and how also the business model, how you're going to charge them for it.
Yeah, so this is really why we wanted to get into these 3 accelerator programs. Optum is part of United Healthcare, so it really is allowing us to understand what is the incremental value of decreasing OR time by an hour, or decreasing neuro ICU stays by half a day, or decreasing speech and language therapy after the fact. And so we're currently exploring 2 business models. The first is a site license model, where departments of neurosurgery with a key opinion leader, writes the business plan in order to attract 1 or 2 new patients each month. And that would be the break even. We're looking at pricing that around 25 to 50K for a site license. And then the other model that we're exploring is on a per patient basis. And a lot of that has to do with whether or not this is going to be reimbursable and with the CPT codes. And so right now, that's why we're in these programs, is really to understand which business model makes the most sense for us.
Thank you.
Hi, Max. So my question is around that slide where you had the competitors.
Sure, right here.
So you said you sit in the middle of these 2 groups. Can you explain more how you do sit in the middle? Like, what does each group do? And then how are you competing with them in this space? Because it's hard to believe that there's no 3D modeling elsewhere in the space.
Sure. So on the left, you have these neuropsych companies. They really do like behavioral testing. They don't touch neuroimaging. They don't touch 3D rendering, but they do touch this is a cat, this is a dog, picture naming, those kinds of tests. On the other side, you have these neuronavigation companies, and the big 3 are Stryker, Medtronic, and Brainlab. And they do 3D navigation, but they don't bring in any cognitive predictive element. So it's almost like if you were to pull out a map back in the 1990s and you want to get from A to B, they tell you all the roads you can take. We tell you the implications of taking these different roads on cognitive outcome. And so sometimes it makes sense to take certain roads because the risk of language deficit would be lower than taking other roads. And so that's really the next step that's coming in brain surgery over the next decade. And that's why we're trying to sit right in the middle of these 2 worlds.
That was a great analogy. So you guys it's safe to say you are the only people in this particular space.
So from what we can gather, we did our international search report. We've done our patent application in December. And from what we can gather, we're the only ones sitting in this space right now. And I think the window is open because of the advances in neuroimaging right now. And this is a window that is going to be open for 2 to 3 more years and slowly closing. But we're ultimately trying to position our IP to be appealing to these big 3 I mentioned, Stryker, Medtronic, and Brainlab, because we could really fill a niche in their portfolio when it comes to predictive analytics.
I thought I heard 230,000 people being afflicted with tumors and epilepsy each year, but is it 230 or is it 20 to 30,000?
Yeah, so let me, if I can throw this slide back up. So 230,000 patients are diagnosed each year with brain tumors or with epilepsy. Now there's a subsection of tumor and a subsection of epilepsy that ultimately end up having this kind of surgery. And in epilepsy, it's if medication fails, and tumor, generally the tumor has to come out regardless of if it's a glioma or a glioblastoma. And so the type of surgery that we really focus on are these awake brain surgeries. And this is what's done with that 20 to 30,000 patient subset. And so that's really our beachhead. But by kind of dominating that niche, we can then begin to generalize this technology to patients that don't have awake brain surgery. And that would include the majority of brain tumor and epilepsy patients.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
What is your claim that you're taking through a regulatory agency?
Okay, so as a regulatory path, I mean, this is a long road for us. Where ideally, you know, it's anticipated will be a class 3 device. And so really the claims that we're making fall outside of your typical neuronavigation companies. So like Brainlab, Stryker, they do 3D modeling, but the 510K option is not available to us because we bring in this machine learning component that looks at cognitive outcome. And so really what that means for us is that we're going to have to do some pre-submissions. This has been a focus for us. Last week, we were speaking with regulatory specialists to begin understanding how we're going to pursue regulatory path, because that's a key thing for us to de-risk right now. And in the next 2 months, we expect to do our pre-subs, really start dialogue with FDA. And ultimately, I think our goal is to pursue breakthrough device pathway because 510K is not an option. So this is an area that we know we need to get up to speed on, but luckily we're in Optum, we're in VentureWell's Aspire program, and we have access to these regulatory specialists that are now helping us really craft this roadmap.
Hi, my name is Dr. Rahul Panat, and I'm from the Carnegie Mellon University. Today, I would like to talk about an exciting technology of a 10-second COVID-19 antibody test that has been developed in my lab at CMU. So COVID-19 pandemic, as we know, has devastated economies worldwide and has led to tragic loss of life. One of the key aspects of the solution to this situation is testing and more testing. So today in the United States, we carry out about 1 million tests per day. And some experts believe that we should be doing at least 2 times this testing, if not more. This gives the total available market for COVID-19 testing today at around $700 million per year. And this is assuming only a 10% market share, which is a very conservative estimate. The worldwide total available market is at least 5 times larger than this number. So there are several competing technologies for COVID-19 testing. So the RT-qPCR test is highly accurate, but the results take about 1 to 2 days to come out. Current antibody tests take about 10 to 20 minutes per test, but they have high false negative rates. And of course, 10 to 20 minutes is much higher than what our technology offers. So our technology is based on 3D printed electrodes in a microfluidic channel, and where we can test presence of antibodies in about 10 to 12 seconds. Our test requires only a few drops of blood, which can be obtained from a single finger prick. The sensing is at 0.1 picomolar concentration, which means earlier detection is possible. And what is most exciting is that we have enabled a smartphone-based platform that allows or lowers the technical expertise required for this testing, which means that home testing is possible. And one device can be used up to 10 tests with a simple treatment of a minute between each of these tests. So currently, the estimated manufacturing cost for the test is $2 per test. We have 3 provisional patents filed, which cover the concept, the architecture, and the manufacturing method. And we are currently discussing with UPMC about patient trials, which would be used for FDA device approval process. So at this point, we are looking for investments in this area, in this exciting technology where FDA, we are looking for FDA approval process, getting support for that. And we would need about $4 million over next 2 years to put a team of marketing experts and engineers together. complete the FDA approval process, build a pilot line so that we can discuss with partners to get to the scale up of the production of this exciting technology. Okay, thank you.
Great presentation, thank you. I have some questions about where you stand with regard to product development. Specifically, you said 3 to 4 years to develop it. Can you tell me, how confident you are that, sorry?
About 2 years to develop it.
Okay, still 2 years. How confident you are that in the ability for it to work in 10 seconds and the ability for real people, like the kind of people out in the field, to be able to do what it takes to get this right and get those results? Are you getting those results with untrained people, or do you need trained people?
So at this time, graduate students are doing these results, so they are trained for sure. But I'm very confident that we will take about 6 months to get to FDA approval process, through the FDA approval process. And the manufacturing process or the steps to make this device are well known. So there is no new manufacturing step as such. It's the sequence of the steps that we use that is unique to this technology. That is what is protected. And we are very confident that a layman can just plug in this device into their smartphone. So there will be a dongle that on one side connects with the device, on the other side connects with the smartphone, and they would simply get a result of whether antibodies are present or not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, we were going a little fast, so I don't know if you covered this in your slide, but who is the customer and who would be charged and how much?
So let me just go back to, I'm sorry if I went through this fast, but the customers would be people who want to carry out antibody tests. So this is the first screening test before we get to the RT-qPCR test. So this would be people, let's say a factory, for example, is running. They want to get tested from every day. There are 1,000 people to be tested every day. Then what this would offer is a screening test that would enable people in the factory to continue to work. And as soon as there are antibodies present on some patient, then that person can be quarantined, and the other people working in the factory can safely continue manufacturing, for example. Okay. And the estimated cost at this time is about $2 per test. And we are thinking about charging $25 per test, which is actually at a very low end of what people are charging for antibody tests. So does that answer your question?
Hi, Rahul. This is Afshan. Very interesting presentation. Quick question. You talked about $2 as a cost to produce. You've estimated that. Yes. Where do you feel, what's your level of confidence with achieving that? And where's your supply chain? Is it a mix of domestic and international, or is it all overseas?
So at this point, much of the things like a glass slide on which we will be depositing a thin layer of gold, and then using a polydimethyl siloxane, which is a mold which is obtained from 3M over in Minnesota. So all the elements of the supply chain are in the United States. And in fact, the 3D printing technology that we are using at this point to increase the sensitivity of the device is a company headquartered in New Mexico. So these 3D printers are domestic, and the supply chain can remain in the United States, but that doesn't prevent us from going abroad. So the $2 per test that I'm estimating is based upon everything resourced from the United States. Yeah. But this is the manufacturing cost though, right? So there will be some marketing costs associated and others that would add up. But $25 per device per test is going to be super profitable, is what I'm confident about. Yeah.
Dr. Panatt, Pat Moran here. Just a quick question. Do you plan on licensing this or commercializing it?
So Patrick, thought about this very thoroughly, considering the importance of this work. And I think the plan at this point is to get to a point where we can come up with a set manufacturing process that can be done at a minimum cost. I come from industry. I spent about a decade at Intel Corporation. So I know how the manufacturing, how critical setting up at least a final manufacturing process is how important it is, and then transferring that to a partner who can scale it up. So I do not think that I will scale up to millions of parts per year, but setting up a pilot line and getting production ready here will add extremely high value to this discovery, and we can take it from there.
So, hi, my name is Stephanie Sidlick, and I am an assistant professor of chemistry and biomedical engineering at Carnegie Mellon University and a co-founder of BioBind. So the problem that BioBind seeks to address is that there is currently no treatment for low-level lead poisoning. And low-level lead poisoning actually causes major intellectual and behavioral disorders. However, even though more than half of all children have a measurable amount of lead in their blood, and this is children in the US, currently only 0.1 million of these children are able to be treated. And these are the children with severely high levels of lead poisoning, greater than 4 to 5 micrograms per deciliter. And so what we seek to do with our BioBinder treatment is to expand this target population. And so kind of this 5 to 45 micrograms per deciliter blood lead level is extremely concerning to doctors, but there is currently no clinical treatment option. And so we feel this is a really important market opportunity that could expand the current market of $20 million to $360 million with BioBind if we are able to treat children with blood lead levels of greater than 5 micrograms per deciliter. And so our solution is in our patent pending BioBinder. And so what we do is take chelators, which are currently FDA approved for chelation therapy, and bind them with a chemical bond to a sugar molecule. And so the reason that chelators, which are used to treat these higher levels, are not indicated for lower levels is because they themselves are toxic. And this is a problem because they are so small, they can kind of stealthily get into places where they aren't supposed to be in the body. However, once we create this chemical bond, we bind them to kind of this big fluffy sugar molecule. And this allows the chelator to still bind to our metals and safely remove lead, but it provides a safe passage through the body because the body only recognizes that large sugar molecule and safely passes it. And this allows for kind of saving us from all of those detrimental effects of lead poisoning. And we're better than the competition. So currently for these low levels of lead poisoning, environmental abatement is what is recommended. But this does not actively remove lead from the body. And so the other drugs are too unsafe for these low levels. So here we have kind of where we are in vitro studies, and we're looking to raise $50 million over the next few years to allow for an exit at a profit of $360 million. So with that, this is our team, and hopefully I've convinced you BioBinders are the future of treatment of lead poisoning.
So somebody's going to have to pay that extra cost. Like today, there isn't a viable solution. And I'm wondering, who do you think is going to pay for this? Do you think it's going to be parents? Is it going to be insurance? And where do you stand in that process?
So currently, this is kind of our this is our conservative estimate for this. Is we do know that doctors do want to treat this 5 micrograms per deciliter, but there isn't a safe way to do it currently. So we feel that doctors will prescribe and then insurance will cover this 5 microgram per deciliter level. Personally, being, ever the optimist and the dreamer that I am, I think we're actually safe enough that we could treat those down to 1 microgram per milliliter. And something that low, I think we actually do have the potential for an over-the-counter therapy. Just because, I mean, here in Pittsburgh, we do have problems with lead in the drinking water. And I do know people who have children who are concerned about these levels, but there's nothing they can do right now. And so that's kind of our vision for how this is. And we've, with our customer discovery, been talking with insurance companies and doctors and, parents who seem to be interested in this as well.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Stephanie. I'm just going to kind of let you continue along that same line. I kind of want to know, why do you think there hasn't been any successful, why don't you have any successful competition? And what's the difficulty with it? And why is yours subject to make $360 million?
Yeah, that is a really great question. And so I think the reason that this has not yet been solved is typically organic chemists focus on small molecules, kind of that active part of the molecule that is able to grab the metals and remove it. But small molecules are small and they can get themselves into trouble because of that. Now, using a larger molecule is something that has been shown to not have the interactions. Typically, they are much safer. And no one has taken a large molecule approach to this yet. And so that's the innovation we bring is, I'm a polymer chemist by training. My PhD is in organic chemistry, but then I went on to do engineering and biomedical engineering in my postdoc. And so kind of looking at the synergy from those two sides, we're bringing something new to it.
Thank you, Stephanie, for a great presentation. You talk about the low-level lead poisoning and higher levels causing major intellectual and behavioral disorders. Is there anything you know from the studies that you've read that links that to, some of the things that we think about now that might have a larger application for your BioBind, such as autism or other areas that develop from, and forgive me for my lack of medical experience, but that develop from levels of lead? Is there any expanded research, that shows further problems?
Yep. And so you mentioned autism, and that is one of kind of these other developmental disorders. But one of the very, I kept on bringing up intellectual function and IQ points because it's quantifiable. And actually the low level lead poisoning is responsible for, because more children are affected, a summation of more IQ points lost than these higher levels, which is why we would want to address it. But not everyone needs to be a genius, but we do want to, interact in society in kind of a normal and comfortable way. Unfortunately, those have fewer quantifiables to them, and the research is still being done to show exactly which of these types of behavioral disorders are associated. But yeah, those are the types of things that you're looking at. And I think the research, as they do more research into this low level lead poisoning, they're finding more and more kind of these drawbacks.
Hi, Dr. Sidlick. Just a question: if we're looking for low level of lead poisoning, what are the symptoms that would lead someone to put a child through that? I mean, to isolate that it might be low lead versus something else.
So actually environment has a lot to do with it. And so kind of my husband's a pediatrician, as is Brian, who actually just had a son. He normally would be here with me today, but has worked closely with me on starting this company. So both of our significant others are pediatricians, and what they tend to bring children in for is this failure to thrive. And so you can tell something is wrong with your child. They aren't quite hitting their developmental milestones on track. And this becomes one of the things that they'll test for. In Pittsburgh, where we're located, there is lead in our, we have an old plumbing system, not plumbing, drinking water system. And so there is lead in our pipes. And so for us, it's kind of one of the first things they test for when children fail to thrive, because it is a very simple blood test that would give them this information.
If nothing else, to knock it out, that it's not the cause.
Yeah.
Okay,
yep.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gregory Houchins. I'm co-founder of Chemin. So the production of Portland cement alone accounts for 8% of all global emissions. So that's billions and billions of tons from a single source. And something that's unique about cement production is that about 50% of those emissions come from chemical release. And in a conventional cement kiln, that CO2 is coming out in dirty flue gas, which makes it hard to capture and reuse and sequester. So the other 50% is coming from thermal fuels, which are required to drive this reaction at over 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So at Chemin, we're going to target those two areas to create a net zero carbon Portland cement synthesis process. So today, despite there being no truly green Portland cement product, the green cement market is already estimated in 2018 to be over $20 billion. And that's just going to keep growing as it starts to eat into the overall $300 billion cement market. We're also seeing aggressive commitments in the public and private sphere, such as the 2030 net zero carbon building commitment. So to really set the stage for our technology, I want to make sure everyone understands that today, the cheapest form of electricity is green renewable electricity in the form of wind and solar, which means that right now is the time to electrify industry, in particular the cement industry. And at Chemin, here's how we're going to succeed. So we have a patent pending technology that takes the same raw materials, which are cheap and abundant, and uses an electrochemical process rather than a thermochemical process to create the same Portland cement product. So right there, by replacing the thermal fuels with electricity, we slashed half the emissions. The second half comes from the fact that our process creates a highly pure stream of CO2. So unlike the conventional cement kiln, we're able to easily purify that, and on its own, it's actually a rather valuable commodity. And so we can eliminate the second half. So as a Swartz Innovation Fellow at Carnegie Mellon University, I'm currently working full-time on this venture. We're doing customer discovery to understand the market early, what they need, what they want. We're also in the lab developing this technology, trying to de-risk it. We're building connections with angel funds and other incubator fellowships to understand how to drive this forward. We're also building a winning team of seasoned entrepreneurs, including advisors who are entrepreneurs and then seasoned cement executives. And so as we look to the future, we're in the lab today. We're trying to de-risk this project. We're looking towards a prototype in 2022 and eventually some venture funds 2022, 2023, which will take us to our first pilot plant. And ultimately, we have the goal that Chemin will play a key role in decarbonizing one of the biggest emitters of CO2, and that we can help consumers and governments reach that net zero carbon building target of 2030. Thank you.
My question is around the product. I wasn't 100% sure, are you selling the process that makes the cement? Are you selling the end product? And how that end product might compare with existing cement in terms of price and capabilities, what major differences there are?
Yeah, so at this point, we haven't quite settled on the exact business model on whether we would sell this process to an existing cement company, license it out, or if we would try to maybe make a corporate, some kind of strategic partnership to make our own plant. Right now, that seems like, maybe that's the way we'd want to go. But in terms of kind of quality of the final product, our goal is to create Portland cement, the same exact Portland cement, that's seeing today, because from our customer discovery, that's what people want. There are some other ways to kind of cut corners, reduce the carbon, but it really is not the same product. And so we're really trying to create the same, and maybe even better, because, cement has some extra additives to it that allow for the chemistry during the synthesis to allow a little bit better, but don't actually contribute to the structural properties. So same or better is what we're going for.
Thank you.
Hi, Greg.
Hi.
Are you guys raising right now?
No, we're not raising. Right now, we're just trying to do some grant funds, non-dilutive.
Okay, and so just to piggyback off of that, can you talk about the market size and where you all fit in the cost structure? I think you kind of mentioned it in your presentation, but you can elaborate.
Yeah, so right now the green cement market almost doesn't really exist because there is no green Portland cement. there's these other cementitious products that are, they're usually industrial waste, like fly ash or slag, that are being sold that you can add to the Portland cement to reduce the amount that you use the concrete. And so we would kind of be directly competitive with that, saying, we can just give you exactly cement. And so to get an idea of where, how big that market would be, should you look at the $300 billion cement market? So you look at the current $20 billion cement market, I don't really know where we would fit because it's kind of doesn't exist right now. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Hi, Greg. You mentioned that wind and solar are right now the cheapest forms of electricity. My question is, are those the cheapest because of government subsidies and other support, or are those actually the cheapest per kilowatt hour to generate? Or is that something you're projecting in the future in terms of the cost structures of that use of electricity?
So right now it is, without government, the cheapest for development. And a lot of these government subsidies are going away 2020 or 2021. So so right now, if you're looking for energy development, the cheapest would be actually solar and wind.
Hi, Greg. Just a simple question. As you move this thing forward, what's the tipping point when it becomes a premium product versus the commodity product that's on the market?
So would you mean in terms of like a price point, or
your COGS? Is it gonna cost the same or cost more to make this?
Yeah. So okay. It is likely. So the exact number right now, I don't have a great grasp on the exact number, but it will likely cost a little bit more. One thing to look at is if you estimate what the cost to, put a carbon capture system on a regular cement kiln and then do some other carbon offsets so that you are net zero carbon. We're looking at about a 75% premium on cost. It's called the green premium currently. So so when you're talking about what is the tipping point, I think it's interesting to look at, should we be cost competitive with the dirty, extremely cheap process, or should we be cost competitive with how difficult it is to get green? And so I think that's what we're targeting right now, which is that higher price on the market today. Can we get lower than that to tackle this kind of, like you said, this premium market, people who care more about the emissions?
Hi, everyone. My name is Anjana. This is my partner, Eva, and we are the co-founders of Penny, the Patient Experience Navigator. So we first want to start out by explaining our problem. The patient experience includes everything from when a patient walks in the door to when they leave the hospital. We're talking about food delivery, cleanliness of hospital rooms, and interactions with healthcare professionals. Over 50 customer discovery interviews have shown us that hospitals are pouring a lot of money into the patient experience. But the current system remains inefficient, inadequate, and disintegrated. For example, food service uses paper feedback cards. Housekeeping only gets feedback if someone has time to stop by a patient's room. And most of the time, patients just end up flagging down a nurse to complain. The patient experience problem is further complicated by a growing financial impact on hospital reimbursement. Value-based healthcare ties 25% of hospital reimbursement from Medicare and Medicaid to the patient experience. We did the math and found that some hospitals are losing millions of dollars because they don't have good patient experience scores. So why is it that hospitals are losing out on so much money? The way current government mandated surveys are administered, it can take up to 18 months for hospitals to receive information on the patient experience. Stale patient experience data not only jeopardizes patient health, but also costs the hospital a fortune in lost reimbursement.
Our solution is Penny, a real-time patient experience analytics platform. The patient would use the app during their hospital stay. The data would be analyzed in real time, ultimately allowing for faster change, leading to better patient outcomes, an increase in hospital ratings, and better hospital reimbursement. This is what a sample patient interface would look like, where patients would be able to share their experience. Penny would ask questions that would measure mood, environment, relationships with healthcare professionals, as these have been proven by research to be the most important factors in improving patient recovery time and decreasing costs for hospitals. On the hospital side, the dashboard would be available to patient experience managers, food service, and maintenance leadership. Our software will continuously be analyzing data to detect common thematic problems and generate personalized recommendation reports for each department. Penny would replace that current inefficient, inadequate, and disintegrated data collection by being able to occur in the hospital while the patient was still in our care. Just think about this: real-time analysis for real-time results. We are currently piloting Penny at UPMC Presbyterian, and there is the potential to expand to over 7,400 hospitals, as 100% of hospitals are impacted by value-based healthcare. Using a business-to-business software as a service model, an average hospital of around 500 beds would pay $260,000 a year, yielding a $1.9 billion addressable market. Your investment of $2,000 would help complete software development for our MVP, which would allow for expansion and implementation into hospitals across the country. Our team consists of me and Anjana, along with our partners in the healthcare field, our mentors in the business world, and of course, our partners in the tech space. Thank you for your time, and we would love a penny for your thoughts.
I guess my question is around the gating factor. If their 25% of their reimbursement is based on patient satisfaction, is feedback really the issue, or is the issue that they can't address, it takes a lot of money to address the things folks are complaining about? And how is your customer discovery supported that feedback is the gating factor?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And we're actually trying to hit this problem from both ends. So our customer discovery has shown us that patients don't have a streamlined way of giving that feedback. So A, hospitals don't have a systemized way to collect that information. But B, like you just said, hospitals don't have a way of deploying an intervention in real time. Maybe because the questions can't be answered in real time, or B, because they don't have the data to do that. So our solution, Penny, kind of hits at both things at the same time. We want to survey patients on actionable items that the hospitals could intervene on, and then also collect that information for hospitals so that if they don't have an intervention in place right now, they can develop a solution so patients are satisfied.
Hello, entrepreneurs. I have kind of a two-part question, but they go together. The first question is, when do people usually take their survey?
So the survey, the ASAP survey, it can be administered anytime up to 48 hours to 6 weeks after discharge. And then patients have a year to complete that. So it can be a really long, like months and months after their hospital stay, and if they complete it.
Right. So that leads me to my second question, which is how I've had major surgery, and I know the last thing that I want to do is be on an app, especially when I'm in pain. And for a lot of people, if they're in, drugged up, for lack of a better way to say it, and all these other kind of things, what would make me want to get on an app and say how I'm feeling if I just want medicine?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point, and one we've thought a lot about. And I guess with our solution, Penny, we want to be available for patients if they need it. So if they don't have anything to say and they're like, fine, and they need the medication, they need to just press the nurse call button, go for it, because that's how you get medication. But for the patients that desperately want to give feedback and something is wrong and they don't know who to talk to and the nurse isn't doing anything about it, we want to be there for them. And we've taken into consideration patients who, can't physically do that survey. And at that point, caregivers can we want caregiver input for Penny as well.
And I think another point of kind of why we hope patients would want to use Penny is that, this isn't dependent on when a nurse comes in and checks in on you, or when your doctor comes by or your resident comes by in the middle of the night. This is really in the hands of the patient, so that, whenever you need to give feedback or talk to someone or need to do something, that it's kind of there for you. And then Penny can kind of serve as the triage tool in further down the road of, okay, is this a food complaint, environment complaint? Is this, communication complaint, versus just ringing the bell and then the nurse comes and then, the nurse doesn't really know who to go to exactly.
My question is around competition. You talk about a platform that is analyzing data in real time and may have an ability to, provide immediate feedback. Let's just say for a second, a food tray was poorly handled, or the food was cold or something, and then, maybe the manager of the food service stops by before the patient's discharged and says, apologize for that, but we're going to do better. where do you see the competition, and how can you actually, do you have any idea from the pilots that you're working on as how you can actually achieve some of that reimbursement in the value-based system?
Yeah, so we've done a competition analysis of like over 60 companies in the patient experience area. And the main things we've been seeing are that a lot of them are like for pre-hospital, like pre-appointment reminders, or discharge stuff. There's not a lot of tools for the patient in the hospital right now. And that's why I think where we kind of think that Penny is unique, that it's for the patient in the hospital, as mobile. And then the main thing, as you said, is this real-time, analysis and results. Which we're still conducting our pilot studies to kind of really make sure that we're asking the right questions, and more importantly, that we can act on the data from these questions.
Thanks for the good presentation. It seems to center around complaints. If I'm running a hospital, I want to know good news too. How do you incentivize patients to give you positive feedback instead of, hey, things are great, just something actionable?
Yeah, that's a great comment, and it's something that we've been inspired by other tools in the patient experience landscape, and that's a kudos button. So if a patient is thrilled with their stay and they want to thank somebody for making a difference in their hospital stay, we do have a kudos button put into the Penny software. But based on our interviews with patients and whatnot so far, if they need to talk to someone, it's usually because there's a problem. Okay. And so we generally say feedback, but we would thoroughly enjoy positive feedback to give back to the hospital.
Hi everyone, my name is Zainab Bouzid. I'm a PhD student working on the Empire study. So to start my presentation today, I'll be starting with the following. So imagine we have John. John wakes up in the morning and he has a terrible chest pain. So he waits a little bit, but it gets worse, and he calls 911. John have been admitted to the emergency department, and he is lucky enough to have to be diagnosed rapidly because he have an obvious heart attack. So he has 7% chance to be in this category. But John can be having a masked heart attack, which represents 2/3 of actual heart attacks, or can be just healthy. So in both situations, he will undergo 6 to 24 hours of blood tests and other procedures to actually be sure of his situation and provide a final diagnosis. If he's in the first category, which is the masked heart attack, actually John is facing some life-threatening situation, because as time goes, he may actually die. Or if he's in the second category, John will be admitted, and he may the hospital may lose a lot of money for his admissions for long hours, while it's not needed because he actually is healthy. So with our technology, John will come to the ED. He will get diagnosed in just 30 minutes instead of a lot of hours. And this will increase his survival by 37%. Besides, the hospital will save over $6 billion in wasted diagnostics and hospital admissions. And also this would improve his satisfaction, which reflects actually the quality of the hospital services. Our technology comes to replace the traditional procedures made nowadays in clinical settings, which are just the reading of the traditional ECG, the blast tests, and the angioplasty, for example. It would gather all the benefits coming from all of these procedures blended together. So this technology relies only on the traditional ECG. It extracts novel features and relies on these features to provide a diagnosis using some machine learning algorithms. So we aim to the following scenario to be happening. So so the ambulance arrives at John's place, they get the ECG, and they transmit it somewhere in the clouds where it gets processed by our algorithms. These processed information will be sent to the clinicians, which would save time and would provide diagnosis even before John comes to the ED. So this would actually revolutionize the way we approach treatment. So we already had like some funding support from different organizations, but we need much more to implement this technology. For the moment, we've been only focused on the actual development, research and development of the technology. So all our resources have been spent, and we were not focused on like digitalization, but we aim to get almost 10% profit from each ECG. And ECG is very, like we have millions of ECGs taken every year. Well, I just wanted to pinpoint the market size, but just like get short and go to present the team, and would thank you for your attention.
My question is around the product. It wasn't 100% clear. Do people still use the EKG and you're helping with the analysis and charging for that? Yes, that's right. So tell me about, this is an additional cost in addition to the EKG. Is that how you're going to, is it per EKG you're going to charge them? Tell me a little bit about the business model.
Yeah, so this, so what our technology does is first, like we have two steps. The first step is the pre-processing of the ECG. So we extract some features from the ECG. And the second step is to actually provide the diagnosis with some machine learning algorithm that will say, yes, heart attack, no. Okay. So this would be actually added to the actual ECG. So currently ECGs already provide an interpretation. So you'll find some interpretation on the ECG, but they only provide interpretations usually for those obvious STEMIs that can be like easily diagnosed. They're only based on one segment, which is called an ST segment on an ECG, and they don't like really, they're not exhaustive. So what we aim, so I think hospitals are currently charged about $8 for the ECG acquisition and $10 for the interpretation. And if we just like provide an add-on on that, it will be like a few dollars. But the ECG is the procedure that is like the most frequent one in the emergency departments. So we have like millions of ECGs yearly and like even every day. And this would like result in a great profit, like to be estimated, because we were not yet in the step of precisely getting the numbers.
So you're hoping this is something that can be reimbursed by insurance and that hospitals will do it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Even though it's an additional cost. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi there. I had the same exact question as Alana, so I'm going to go ahead and use my minute to let you do your marketing slide, sorry, your market share slide.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that would be great. So what I was going to say in the markets, oh, sorry. We actually have a few competitors, but they're actually focused on the analysis of the ECG and its interpretation. And those ones, for example, are focused rather on the transmission of the ECG for better communication, maybe between the different parties, like healthcare providers, etc. But our the uniqueness of our solution is that it actually diagnoses those masked heart attacks that none of the other techniques focus on or like try to reveal. The estimated worth of the market size is $5.4 billion with an CAGR of 9.7%, which is very promising. Thank you.
Very nice presentation. question for you. What is your pathway to FDA approval? If you need it, what would you need? And to being a CPT code.
So we were planning on this. I mean, for the moment, we did not start yet this procedure, but so our technology is already patented. We have already a patent for that, but it definitely would need the FDA approval. We did not discuss the details for that, but it would be really important to go through those details because it would be, so the impact of this technology will be really important. And sometimes it's dangerous, right? If it provides wrong estimations or wrong information. There was some research about humans and machine collaboration, some recent paper that I read recently, and we may think of that. So we provide a diagnosis, but it's maybe not, we won't say to the clinician, just take this diagnosis. We need some sort of collaboration between both parties.
So are you planning clinical trials at some point?
Yeah, but so for the moment, we're at the stage of, we already had some published work about the actual algorithms that would diagnose the heart attacks. So what we call acute coronary syndrome. It was recently published in Nature Communications. And we also studied the importance of certain features, but we did not yet start clinical trials because we need some infrastructure. So I think you noticed I was talking about the cloud. So we have the algorithm that needs to be optimized, of course, with more information, more data, etc. We're getting more data to fine-tune the algorithms, and also we need to prepare all that infrastructure, and we cannot exactly tell when this would happen because that needs a lot of software resources, and we are in that stage of the study. We're gonna start soon.
Hi, maybe you can help me with something. Is it ECG or EKG? I've heard both.
Yeah, actually both. Yeah, both are said. So ECG is electrocardiogram, right? And in some, I think it's some German references, it will be EKG. To differentiate it from the EEG, which is electroencephalogram. So when you hear ECG and EEG, it sounds the same, while EKG makes kind of some difference.
Okay, now the real question. Do you plan on doing this yourself or partnering with some device company along the way?
For the moment, we're planning on doing this ourselves. When it would come, so I'm doing all this machine learning analysis and algorithm development. We would definitely also at some point go to some deep learning, etc. But when it comes to the infrastructure, some of we would definitely need. I mean, I'm not experienced in that, so we are planning on adding another person in the team or partnering. I do believe we tend to rather recruit someone who'd be experienced in this part of the project.
Thank you to all of our presenters and judges for the great job they all did. Now it is time for you to vote. Please click the orange vote button below this window and select your favorite pitch and click submit. Join us right back here at 2 p.m. to find out the winners and for our keynote address. Thank you.